The biggest problem now facing the world is climate change.
Experiencing some of their hottest ever months.
Last month was the warmest June on record.
By the weekend, at least 14 states are expected to break temperature records.
This June heat wave will possibly break previous national all-time records.
In fact, Germany recorded its highest ever June temperature on Wednesday.
The planet's on fire.
Experts say that we have until 2030 to avoid catastrophe. It also says if unprecedented changes are not made and made soon, there will be irreversible damage to the planet.
Climate change is ravaging communities around the globe in devastating and catastrophic proportions. From increased natural disasters,
with the biggest, Hurricane Dorian, killing at least 70 people and leaving 70,000 homeless.
greater droughts.
Drought continues to parch other parts of the U.S., sparking wildfires and damaging crops in 1/3 of the nation's counties.
Forest fires.
Now the Amazon rainforest is being consumed by fire. In fact, there's an 80% increase in fires just over the last year alone.
Destruction of wildlife habitats and populations.
But scientists say we're now losing species at the fastest rate for millions of years.
Rising global temperatures from human activity is dismantling our environment. While countries around the world are making progress towards reducing our carbon footprint, the measures being taken are not nearly enough, and scientists are urging us to make significant changes before it's too late. When it comes to climate change, polls show that a strong majority of Americans, about 8 in 10, say that human activity is fueling climate change. Roughly half believe action is urgently needed within the next decade if humanity is to avert its worst effects. Nearly 4 in 10 now say climate change is a crisis, which is up from less than a quarter 5 years ago. While the majority of Americans are seeing the light, that still leaves 20% of Americans denying the realities of climate change, despite 99% of scientists stating climate change is being exacerbated by humans. So that leaves us with the obvious question. Why do we still have so many climate change deniers? And more importantly, why haven't we taken the necessary steps towards solving our climate crisis? Let's address the first one, the media.
And so-called climate justice, whatever that is.
Let's talk a little policy first off. What did you think of the global warming summit in Paris this week?
I think it's ridiculous. We have bigger problems.
Mainstream media is the driving force behind our political narrative. And considering our mainstream news outlets are now incredibly polarized on many issues, their audiences have for the most part followed suit. According to the International Journal of Press and Politics, studies have found that increasing exposure to Fox News was associated with weaker endorsement of mainstream scientists' views about global warming. They've also acknowledged, although CNN and MSNBC have received less empirical attention, it is reasonable to expect that exposures to these networks will, conversely, increase acceptance of global warming. Their study analyzed 269 news transcripts of the three networks. Fox News was consistently the least likely to be accepting and the most likely to be dismissive of climate change. Nearly 60% of Fox News broadcasts were dismissive of climate change, whereas less than 20% were accepting of climate change. With Fox News being the most watched major news network in America, it is no wonder that their message is being adopted by so many, regardless of the overwhelming evidence against their climate denial made by scientists. The spread of false news is not only the fault of our media, but multinational corporations that profit from fossil fuels hold responsibility, and are arguably even more detrimental. One corporation in particular has had a great impact on our current crisis and falsified narratives. I'm talking about ExxonMobil.
ExxonMobil is one of the world's largest and most powerful oil and gas corporations.
ExxonMobil tried to systematically mislead the public about climate change for 40 years.
A study was conducted by 2 scientists from Harvard University, analyzing 187 documents published by ExxonMobil between 1977 and 2014 discussing climate change, and their conclusions were damning.
What we found when we've read these documents is a clear, unmistakable, systematic discrepancy between on the one hand, what ExxonMobil said and discussed about climate change in private and in academic circles, and on the other hand, what it said about climate change to the general public.
As you could see from the chart, it is obvious why many believe Exxon intentionally lied to the public, as their internal and peer-reviewed studies were more likely to acknowledge the cause, seriousness, and solvability of climate change, while their unreviewed documents and advertorials were less likely to express the seriousness and importance of solving climate change, especially with their advertorials, since advertorials are often to advertise and promote a company's agenda. While their misleading of the public is a horrific tragedy, ExxonMobil and many other large fossil fuel corporations have donated a great deal to our politicians in order to maintain the status quo, and their influence is definitely felt. Take, for example, our current president.
Unprecedented action to roll back several environmental protections over the past year.
As you could see in the graphic, Trump is the biggest recipient of contributions from oil and gas companies, which makes it no secret why he's been continually gutting environmental protection and regulation. While climate change continues to ravage our communities and habitats, Trump continues to send us in the opposite direction, cutting regulations for air and water pollution, drilling, infrastructure, animal protection, and many others, accumulating to 100 total rollbacks. Obviously, this climate agenda is not the answer to our climate epidemic, but what is? What policies will defeat the greatest existential threat to our planet and ensure the survival of our future generations?
Several Democrats unveiled a Green New Deal last week, modeled on President Roosevelt's New Deal, but aimed at addressing climate change. What is it?
A Green New Deal is not an opportunity just to heal our planet, but also the best chance to heal our economy. I'm talking about a full-scale mobilization of the economy, the kind of which we haven't seen since World War II. A Green New Deal would create tens of millions of jobs. We'd need people installing solar panels, retrofitting buildings, building electric vehicles, and reforesting public lands.
The Green New Deal was created by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senators Ed Markey and Bernie Sanders, an incredibly detailed plan designed to combat climate change and wealth inequality in America. According to the Climate Justice Alliance, the Green New Deal is based on three principles: fighting climate change by ending the use of fossil fuels, building a clean economy with good jobs of the 21st century, and ensuring that no community gets left behind. While the Green New Deal has growing support from our public and some in our government, the media and many politicians have continually delegitimized the Green New Deal, calling it an unrealistic, fairy tale-like proposition. In my opinion, much of this is just rank propaganda.
I think it is very important for the Democrats to press forward with their Green New Deal. It would be great for the so-called carbon footprint to permanently eliminate all planes, cars, cows, oil, gas, and the military, even if no other country would do the same. Brilliant!
Cars, lawnmowers, commercial airliners, everything must go. Everything must go.
You're talking about zero carbon emissions, no use of fossil fuels.
That is the goal.
That's a goal you could only imagine possible if you have no idea how the energy economy works or how energy is produced in this country.
While these individuals are busy denouncing the importance of serious climate change investment, they're championing a path that'll lead us to food and water shortages, flooding of major coastal cities, detrimental natural disasters, an inevitable migration crisis, elimination of much of the planet's rich biodiversity and imperative ecosystem, and most importantly, the deaths of millions. While the Green New Deal may not be a cure-all to every problem facing our nation and the globe, or maybe it isn't the answer at all, full-fledged investment towards saving the planet is of the utmost importance, regardless of what the naysayers suggest.
Having consideration of trade-offs, and that's been going on with global warming for several years now. It's really expensive to do what a lot of the climatistas, as I call them, want us to do.
We must understand that some major news networks, the fossil fuel industry, and many politicians will continue to try and mislead us. If these people did care about the future of humanity and life on Earth, they would reiterate the concerns of the scientists, but many of them do not, because they have an agenda to push and a paycheck to cash. We must all unite in the fight against climate change, educate our peers, challenge our representatives to introduce serious climate change regulation and legislation, fight the fossil fuel industry, rebuild our broken communities, protect our environment and biodiversity, and promote green, healthy living. It isn't too late, but we must act now and be part of the resistance. It is on us to ensure the survival of our generation and the many to come.